Hey guys, it's Hannah and welcome back to my channel. I'm doing a really quick intro because I look like a potato. I'm not going to be on camera for the rest of the video except for here and maybe in the outro. I'm going to be doing my palette collection slash I'm going to be talking about my palettes in groupings of 3 from my least favorite palettes that I own to my favorite palettes that I own, and also I'm going to mention the palettes that I own that I haven't actually tried yet. So if you want to know what palettes I have and which ones that I like the least and which ones that I like the best, then just keep on watching. Alrighty, first I'm going to be talking about the palettes that I have and have not tried yet. This is the first one, is the ColourPop Make Up Your Mind palette. It is 6 shimmer shades. I haven't used this yet. I got it for free when I made a ColourPop purchase. I just don't really gravitate towards such a small all shimmer palette like this. The next palette that I have and I haven't tried is the Kat Von D Pastel Goth palette. I actually have a look planned with this palette for next Friday, so I'm really excited. I'm going to do blue with orange and see how it turns out. But yes, I've not tried that palette yet either. The next palette is the Kat Von D Divine palette. This is what it looks like. I haven't tried this either. It is all blues and greens. The next palette is the Too Faced Gingerbread palette. One of the shades has pan, but that's how it was when I bought it. I'm really excited to try this palette, even though I haven't tried it yet, because I think that the color story is stunning, and I've heard really good things about this palette. Next I have the Kevyn Aucoin Electro Pop palette. I really honestly regret buying this palette. It is all shimmers and I don't know when I'm going to use this, but I have it and I want to try it, but I do regret making this purchase. Next I have the newest addition to my collection, which is the Juvia's Place Afrique palette. I'm super excited to try this. I think such a unique color story and I love Juvia's Place shadows. The last palette that I have yet to try is the Too Faced Life's Festival palette. It is super colorful and beautiful. I am also super excited to try this. The duochromes in here look stunning, and I have also heard pretty good things about this palette as well. Now I'm going to be talking about the palettes that I have tried that I own, and I'm going to start with my least favorite and go up to my favorite palettes, doing it in groupings of 3 to 4 because I couldn't decide which one my absolute least favorite and which one my absolute favorite was, if that makes any sense. So first I'm going to talk about my least favorite 4 palettes. The first one is the Crown Fuego palette. This is what it looks like. It's super warm toned and the quality isn't bad, but I just don't gravitate towards colors like this necessarily. Next I have the Tarte Make Believe in Yourself palette. Whoops! I think that this is a beautiful palette and it is extremely good quality, but it's all shimmers except for this one matte up in the corner, so I don't use it that often, so that's why I have it in my least favorite category. Next I have my Laura Lee Party Animal palette. I don't dislike this palette, I just kind of dislike Laura Lee. I think the shadows in here are alright. I like the pink one, but I haven't gotten a lot of use out of this otherwise, so really I just need to work with this a little bit more, but I have trouble because I don't like Laura Lee that much. Lastly, in my least favorite category, I have the Lime Crime Venus 2 palette. I think that this is super unique color story, which is really why I bought it, but I think that the shadows in here are a little bit patchy. I really need to work with this more because I haven't used it a whole bunch. Now moving on to my second least favorite group, we have the Ace Beaute Grandiose palette. And we got this in a BoxyCharm and it's very good quality. It's super pigmented, but kind of like with the Crown one, I just don't gravitate towards these colors much. I've only used it like once or twice. I would love to try other shadows from Ace though, like their Paradise collection. Next we have the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Vault Dark Magic palette. I love the colors in here, but they're so dark and I don't wear dark colors like this very often. Next we have the Subculture palette by ABH. I love ABH's formula, but as many of you know, the Subculture formula was interesting and not the same as their normal formula, so I just didn't love this one, but I do love the color story. Moving on to the next category, I have the Pure Festival palette. I just got this in a BoxyCharm, and I really like the quality of these shadows, but the pressed glitters were pretty horrible, and there's only like 2 fun pops of color, which is why I have it in like the third to last category. Next we have the ColourPop My Little Pony palette. I like the color story of this palette, but I feel like a lot of the shades lack pigment, specifically the matte shades. I feel like there's only one matte shade in here that's pigmented and it's this one, but other than that it lacks a lot of pigment. Lastly, in this category, we have the Anastasia Beverly Hills Prism palette. I really liked this palette when I first got it, but I just have palettes that I like so much better than this now. Moving on to the next category, we have the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. I used to really love this palette, but now I just feel like it lacks pigment. I have so many more palettes in my collection now that are so much better than this, but I still do like to use this palette if I'm going for a light peachy look. Next, I have the Morphe Jekyll & Hill Vault Ring the Alarm palette. I think that this is good quality, but a lot of the colors in here are way too similar for my liking. I wish there would have been more variety in this palette. Lastly, in this group of three, we have the Juvia's Place Zulu palette. I haven't gotten a lot of use out of this palette, and I think the color story is pretty, but I think that these shades are a little bit patchy from my experience with them, but I do need to play around with them more. I do really like the shimmers in this palette, though. Moving on to the next grouping, we have the Lime Crime Venus Original palette. I really love the color story of this palette. I think that the shades are super pretty. I just wish the shimmer shades were more metallic and not as like light and natural, if that makes any sense. Next, we have the Alamar Cosmetics Reina de Caribe palette. I really love the shimmers in this palette. I think they're stunning. When I used the mattes, I found that they were slightly patchy, but I do need to work with this a little bit more. I haven't used this a whole ton, but the shimmer shades are absolutely gorgeous. Next, we have a big one. It's the Too Faced Then and Now palette, if I can get it open. I really think that this is a really pretty color story. I wish there were more mattes. There's only 3 matte colors in here, but I do really like some of the big square metallics at the bottom. Next, I have the Urban Decay Elements palette, starting this new category. I really like this palette a lot. I wish there were more mattes in it, similar to that other palette I just talked about by Too Faced. I think that this is just in the need of more mattes. The quality of these shadows, though, are incredible. Next, I have the Venus XL palette. I think that this is really pretty, but I wish that this had a little bit more color variation in the palette instead of some of the shades being so similar to one another. Next, I have the James Charles Morphe palette. This is about in the middle of my collection of what I like and what I don't like. I need to play around with it more. I have used it quite a bit. I have a 5 Looks 1 palette with this. I find that a lot of the bright colorful shades are patchy and I can't figure out because I'm using them with primers, and I just really need to figure out how I can get this to work because the quality is just not what I thought that it was going to be honest. Now in the next little category of 3, we have the Jekyll & Hill Morphe palette Vault and Bling Boss. And I love the color story of this palette, but I found a lot of the mattes in this palette to be slightly patchy, which was really sad. Next, we have the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. I didn't buy this until a year after it came out, probably because I didn't really think that it would be interesting to me, but I actually really enjoy this palette when I'm looking for a nice mauve-y or pinky warm look. Next, we have the Juvia's Place Deuce palette. I think that this is such a unique color story. I love the Juvia's Place shimmer formula. The only color in here that I'm not a big fan of is this one down at the bottom. I think it's kind of patchy, but other than that, I really enjoy this palette. Moving on to the next category of 3, we have the ColourPop Element of Surprise palette. This palette looks super boring to me at first, but I actually find myself reaching for this a lot when I'm going for a neutral brown, super easy look. Next, we have the Jekyll & Hill Morphe Vault in Armed and Gorgeous. This is my favorite of the Vault collection. I find that this is very good quality all through and through, and that there's a good variety of shades in this palette. Lastly, in this category, we have the Too Faced Pretty Rich palette. I actually love this palette. I think that this blue color is stunning, and the pressed glitters in here are way better than the pressed glitters in the Pure palette, and I actually really enjoy this palette. So we're getting into my top 9 palettes. So the first one I'm going to talk about in this little grouping of 3 is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Soft Glam palette. I really like this palette. If I'm going for a warm neutral look, I often reach for this Anastasia Beverly Hills palette. Next, I have the Kat Von D Fetish palette. I think that this is such a unique color story. I know that people don't like Kat Von D, and I have a video about her that I will link down below if you want to know my opinions on the whole matter. But I love this palette. I think that the quality is incredible, and I know that this didn't get a lot of great reviews, but I do in fact love this palette. Next we have the original Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette. I actually still love this palette. I think it is such a good quality palette. It is my favorite Morphe palette that I have, and it is the first Morphe palette that I ever bought. I don't like Jaclyn Hill that much, but unlike the Laura Lee palette, I still find myself reaching for this because I do like it a lot. It is incredible quality. Alright, moving on into top 6, we have the Lime Crime Venus 3 palette. This is my favorite Venus palette that I own. I have the first 3 and the first XL palettes. This is incredible. I love this shade and this shade. And then these are such unique shimmer shades. They're more like topper shades, but if I'm going for just a light, beautiful, glittery look, this is the palette that I find myself reaching for a lot. And it's a color scheme that I am super drawn to. Speaking of a color scheme I'm drawn to, I am now going to talk about my Anastasia Beverly Hills Norvina palette. I think that this is a stunning palette. I love the color scheme, how they did a purple palette without it being overly purple. And again, just like the Soft Glam, I think that the metallic formula is beautiful in this palette. Lastly, in my top 6 is the ABH Sultry palette. I, again, love the metallic formula in this palette. I think that ABH has just gotten their metallic formula so right in the past several palettes that they've made, and this is one of the only cool toned neutral palettes that I have, and I think it's beautiful. Alright guys, we're on to my top 3. Again, I just want to say that these are in no particular order. I could not pick which of these is my absolute favorite palette, so these are just my top 3. My first one in the top 3 that I'm going to talk about is the Kat Von D Saint and Sinner palette. Guys, I just love this palette. I know that a lot of people didn't like this palette. They thought the color scheme was horrible, the layout was awful. I do not care what the layout looks like. This palette is incredible quality. I can create some super unique looks with this palette, and I absolutely just love this palette so much. Next, I have the only Violet Voss palette that I have and have ever tried, the Flamingo palette. This palette is just beautiful. I have pan on the shade Bikini. I love the colors in this palette. I think that these are such fun, bright colors and that they're all super good quality, and I love using this palette, especially now that summer's coming up. I'm super excited to get to use this some more. Alright guys, I have one more palette, and it is the last palette in my top 3. It is the Juvia's Place Magic palette. I love the Juvia's Place formula, and this is definitely my favorite Juvia's Place palette that I have. I know so many people love this palette, and I'm so glad that I finally have it. I just stumbled over my words. But I do absolutely love this palette. It's super unique. Some beautiful looks can be created with this palette, and I'm so glad that I finally have it. Alrighty guys, and that is all of my eyeshadow palettes ranked from my least favorite palettes to my favorite palettes. If I counted correctly, I have 41 eyeshadow palettes. I have 5 other ones, but I'm actually just going to give them to my mom, so I'm not even going to bother showing you them because like I said, I'm not keeping them, I'm giving them away. I hope you enjoyed seeing the palettes that I have, guys, and thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!